on external generative organs. We have a very distinguished speaker this evening in Dr. Shashi Lata Kabra. She is an alumni of the Calcutta Medical College. Also, post-graduation in MD, Obstetrics and Gynecology from the Calcutta Medical College. She has a number of prestigious awards to her credit. A few of them are the prestigious FICOG in Ahmedabad in the year 2017, and the prestigious fellowship in minimal access surgery in the year 2017. She has got a vast teaching experience of more than 2 decades, and she is a trainer of trainer for medical and forensic examination of survivor of sexual assault. She is a trainer of trainer for Lakshya and many other courses in obstetrics and gynecology. Incidentally, she is also the founder secretary of Delhi Gynecological Forum, that is the Southwest. She is a member of the National Mentoring Team for Lakshya, which is a WHO, All India Institute of Medical Sciences and Government of India initiative. We are proud that she is a recipient of the IMA Appreciation Award for the year 2018, the Foxy Award for 2019, and the most prestigious APJ Abdul Kalam Appreciation Award for the year 2021, and the AOGD Appreciation Award for the year 2021. So we have a very distinguished speaker who is going to handle the topic of external generative organs. Over to you, Dr. Shashi L. Kabra, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity and sharing this platform here. And thank you so much for the kind introduction, sir.
Welcome, madam. Welcome.
So I start sharing my screen, sir.
Yeah. Oh.
So am I audible, sir? Hello? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You're very much.
Yeah. So, dear students, basic science is a very important part of any broad specialty, and that too in obs and gynae. And today we will discuss one important topic of basic sciences in obstetrics, and that is external generative organs of female. It can also be called external genital organs. So first talk about vulva. Vulva is also called pudenda, and commonly it is designated as the vulva, and it includes many structures which are visible externally because this is external genital organs. They are visible externally from the symphysis pubis to the perineal body. And there are many structures in sequence. I am just telling mons pubis, most anterior part, then labia majora and minora, clitoris, hymen, vestibule, urethral opening, greater vestibular or Bartholin glands, minor vestibular glands, paraurethral glands, and the vulva receives innervations and vascular supports from the pudendal nerve and pudendal artery, respectively. Now let's have a look on the vulval structures. You see, this is the anterior structure, this is the posterior side. Most anteriorly, we have mons pubis. This is prepuce, the two fold of labia minora. The anterior fold is prepuce, then this is glans clitoris, frenulum, that I will come to these details later on. Then this is labia majora, labia minora, external urethral opening, vagina, fourchette, perineal body, this long part, anus, and on this side, this is a cut section, one vulvar structures and subcutaneous layer of the anterior perineal triangle. And here you can see that the Colles fascia is continued as Scarpa's fascia. Here we have ischiopubic ramus, inferior fascia of levator ani and pelvic diaphragm that I will describe in details, and external anal sphincter. Please listen to each and every word carefully, as these all this teaching material is from Williams Gynecology, and you can write in your exam as it is. There is no confusion. And in the inset, you can see the vestibule, boundaries and openings, vestibular and Bartholin glands, minor vestibular glands, and paraurethral glands. This is Hart's line, which I will describe later on. This is the site for Bartholin glands, and these are Skinner's glands. So let's come to the description of mons pubis. It is a fat-filled cushion overlying the symphysis pubis, and after puberty, the mons pubis skin is covered by curly hair that forms the triangular eustachium, whose base aligns with the upper margin of the symphysis pubis. In men and some hirsute women, this extends farther onto the anterior abdominal wall towards the umbilicus, and especially those patients who are having PCOS and those who are having dystrophica syndrome, you can see this. Now, labia majora. These are 7 to 8 centimeter long and 2 to 3 centimeter wide and 1 to 1.5 centimeter thick. And they are continuous directly with the mons pubis superiorly on both the sides. And you know that there is a very important structure, round ligaments terminate at their upper borders. And here covers the labia majora, and they have abundant apocrine, acrine, and sebaceous glands. And beneath the skin, there is a dense connective tissue layer which is nearly void of muscular elements. And they are rich in elastic fibers and fat. This fat mass provides bulk to the labia majora and is supplied by a rich venous plexus. So even a smallest bleeding lead to a massive bleeding here. During pregnancy, this vasculature may develop varicosities, especially in multipara, from increased venous pressure created by the enlarging uterus. And this may appear as inwards tortuous veins or small gray plate clusters, but typically this is asymptomatic and does not require much treatment. Now, each labium minora is a thin tissue fold that is medial to each labium majus. The labium minora extends superiorly, where it divides into 2 lamellae, as I told you in my first slide. From each side, the lower lamellae fuse to form the frenulum of the clitoris, and the upper lamellae merge to form the prepuce. Inferiorly, the labia majora extends to approach the midline as low ridges of tissue that join to form the fourchette. And the length is 2 to 10 centimeter, and width is from 1 to 5 centimeter. I'm going back to my previous slide to show you this here. Now you see, this is prepuce, the upper fold. This is frenulum, and this is clitoris. And you can see the fourchette here. Structurally, labia minora is composed of connective tissue with numerous vessels, elastin fibers, and very few smooth muscle fibers, supplied with many nerve endings and are extremely sensitive. The epithelia of the labia minora differ with location. Thinly keratinized, stratified squamous epithelium covers the outer surface of each labium. On the inner surface, the lateral portion is covered by the same epithelium up to a demarcating line termed Hart's line, which I've showed you in my inset. Medial to this line, each labium minora is covered by squamous epithelium that is non-keratinized, and labia minora lack hair follicle. Remember this very well. It lacks acrine glands and apocrine glands. Sebaceous glands are numerous. So clitoris, it is the principal female erogenous organ and located beneath the prepuce, above the frenulum and urethra. So we were talking about 2 lamellas which were folding around the clitoris. The upper one is prepuce and the lower one is frenulum. It projects downwards and inwards towards the vaginal opening, 2 centimeter long, and it is composed of a glans, a corpus or body, and 2 crura. The respective organ is penis in males, and the glans is usually less than 0.5 centimeter in diameter, and it is covered by a stratified squamous epithelium, and it is richly innervated. The body of the clitoris contains 2 corpora cavernosa, Extending from the clitoral body, each corpus cavernosum diverges laterally to form a narrow crust. Each crust lies along the inferior surface of its respective ischiopubic ramus and deep to the ischiocavernosus muscle. Whenever you get this type of questions of basic science in your exams, so you always try to represent everything in a diagrammatic form, as I have shown you in diagrams, because that carries more marks. Now, blood supply of clitoris, internal pudendal artery, and deep artery of the clitoris supplies the clitoral body, and dorsal artery of the clitoris supplies the glans and the prepuce. Now coming to the vestibule, it is an almond-shaped area enclosed by Hart's line laterally. This is Hart's line where there is a, as I told you, there was a change of epithelium. Then external surface of the hymen medially, the clitoral frenulum anteriorly, and the fourchette posteriorly. Vestibular openings. The vestibule is perforated by 6 openings. Topmost is urethra, then vagina, then we have 2 Bartholin glands opening here, and 2 ducts of the largest parietal glands, also called the Skinny's glands. The posterior portion of the vestibule between the fourchette and the vaginal opening is also called fossa navicularis, and it is usually observed only in nulliparous. Now I'm coming to bilateral Bartholin glands. They are also called greater vestibular glands. Their diameter is 0.5 to 1 centimeter, and on their respective side, each lies inferior to the vestibular bulb and deep to the inferior end of the bulbospendiosus muscle. Formerly, it used to be called bulbocavernosus muscle. And the duct extends medially from each gland, which measures 1.5 to 2 centimeter in length, and it opens distal to the hymenal ring at 5 and other at 7 o'clock position in the vestibule. We have already said that vestibule has 2 openings of the greater vestibular glands or Bartholin's glands. And regarding clinical significance, you all know that it leads to the formation of Bartholin abscess. You must have seen this in your OPTs also. It may develop an abscess, then it needs to be drained immediately, and it may develop also in a cyst. Then we do a planned surgery to remove this if it is causing inconvenience to the patient. So following trauma or infection, either duct may swell and obstruct to form a cyst, or if infected, then it may form an abscess. And in contrast, the minor vestibular glands are shallow glands lined by simple mucin secreting epithelium, and they open along the heart line. Now coming to the parietal glands. They are collective arborization of glands whose numerous small ducts open predominantly along the entire inferior aspect of the urethra. Among these, the 2 largest are called Skinny's glands, and their duct typically lie distally and near the urethral meatus. Clinically, inflammation and duct obstruction of any of the paraurethral glands can lead to urethral diverticulum formation. The urethral opening or meatus is in the midline of the vestibule and 1 to 1.5 centimeter below the pubic arch and the short distance above the vaginal opening. In adult women, the hymen is a membrane of varying thickness, and it surrounds the vaginal opening more or less completely. It is composed mainly of elastic and collagenous connective tissue. Both outer and inner surfaces are covered by non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium, and the aperture of the intact hymen ranges in diameter from pinpoint to one that admits 1 or 2 fingertips. As a rule, the hymen is torn at several sites during first coitus. However, identical tears may form by other penetration, for example, by tampons used during menstruation, and the edges of the torn tissue soon be epithelialized. Here, I just want to highlight a practical point that when we examine a survivor of sexual assault, then we used to comment on hymen. Nowadays, like vagina introduces 2 fingers on this, that has been become obsolete and it has been omitted from the finding. It cannot prove or disprove rape. And second thing, this hymen may be torn in athletes or by use of these tampons and all things. And in many patients, in many persons, it may not be torn. So it is of no significance. Only the injury, whether it is fresh or old, that is more important. No changes with pregnancy. In pregnant women, the hymenal epithelium is thick and rich in glycogen, and changes produced in the hymen by childbirth are usually readily recognizable. Over time, the hymen transforms into several nodules of various size, termed as hymenal or myrietiform caranculus. It's a beautiful picture. It was taken from Corton's Anatomy in 2016, showing the vagina and surrounding anatomy, and has been shown in the textbook of Williams also. This is a section. You see, this is the uterus, this is bladder anteriorly, this is the posterior side. So this is the body of the uterus, this is vagina, and here you can see this is the posterior cul-de-sac or pouch of Douglas. You all know that the posterior wall of the vagina is longer than the anterior wall, and this is posterior vaginal fornix. Here is rectum, and this is perineal body, which extends from this to the anus, and this is the rectovaginal space, and at some places it is filled with connective tissue, and at some places there is only a septum. This is an internal Allen sphincter muscle. Then here, as I told you, it is fused with urethra and vagina, and this is vesicovaginal space, vesicouterine and peritoneal reflection. The peritoneum comes like this and reflected like this, and this is median umbilical ligament. You should practice this diagram and should draw in your exam, and don't forget to color it, because color will make distinction of all the organs more. And by convention, you can use brown color for muscles, green for nerves, blue for veins, and red for arteries. Vagina and surrounding anatomy. Proximal to the hymen, the vagina is a muscular membranous tube. It is basically a potential space, and that extends to the uterus and is interposed lengthwise between the bladder and the rectum. You can see here, this is bladder, and this is rectum, and this is vagina. Anteriorly, the vagina is separated from the bladder and urethra by connective tissue, the vesicovaginal septum. I have already shown you. Posteriorly, between the lower portion of the vagina and the rectum, similar tissues together form the rectovaginal septum, and the upper fourth of the vagina is separated from the rectum by the rectouterine pouch, and it is also called the cul-de-sac or pouch of Douglas. Just look at this picture, cul-de-sac or pouch of Douglas, upper one. And here is the fused distal segment of the urethra. Normally, the anterior and posterior walls of the vaginal lumen lie in contact with only a slight space intervening at the lateral margins. The anterior wall measures 6 to 8 centimeter, posterior wall 7 to 10 centimeter. I've shown you this in the picture, that this is longer. The upper end of the vaginal wall is subdivided by the cervix into anterior, posterior, and 2 lateral fornices. And clinically, the internal pelvic organs usually can be palpated through the thin walls of these fornices. This line is very, very important. When I used to do PG, my teacher used to tell me that you should do many PVs if you want to become a good PG and good doctor. And I do emphasize on the fact that we should know how to learn doing this PV examination, and to have a knowledge about internal pelvic organs, any masses, any adhesion, anything through these 2 fingers. Sometimes even ultrasound is not reported properly, and we should have confidence in our internal pelvic examination through these 2 fingers. So I advise you that you all should do these and practice this. The vaginal lining is composed of non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium and underlying lamina propria. And in premenopausal women, this thinning is shown into numerous thin transverse ridges known as rugae, which line the anterior and posterior vaginal walls along their length. When you have done any speculum examination, then you must have seen these rugaes, and deep to this is a muscular layer which contains smooth muscle, collagen, and elastin. And beneath the muscularis lies an adventitious layer consisting of collagen and elastin. Now, vagina lacks glands, so how it is lubricated? It is lubricated by a transudate that originates from the vaginal subepithelial capillary plexus and crosses the permeable epithelium. And due to increased vascularity during pregnancy, vaginal secretions are notably increased. And they are so much increased that at times this may be confused with amniotic fluid leakage. But the amniotic fluid is thinner and vaginal secretion is little thicker. So coming to the clinical significance, after birth-related epithelial trauma and healing, fragments of stratified epithelium occasionally are embedded beneath the vaginal surface, and similar to its native tissue, this buried epithelium continues to shed degenerated cells and keratin. And as a result, epidermal inclusion cysts which are filled with keratin debris may form. And these are common vaginal cysts. Blood supply of vagina, the proximal portion by the cervical branch of uterine artery and by the vaginal artery. Uterine artery and vaginal artery both are branches of the anterior division of internal iliac artery. The latter may variably arise from the uterine or inferior vesical artery directly from the internal iliac artery. And the middle rectal artery contributes supply to the posterior vaginal wall, and the distal wall receives contribution from the internal pudendal artery. At each level, vessels supplying each one of the vagina course medially across the anterior and posterior vaginal wall, and they form a midline anastomosis. It's a highly vascular structure. An extensive venous plexus also surrounds the vagina and follows the course of the arteries, and lymphatics from the lower third along with those of the vulva drain primarily into the inguinal lymph nodes, from the middle third into the internal iliac nodes, and from the upper third, they drain into the external, internal, and common iliac nodes. So perineum, this is a diamond-shaped area between the thigh and has boundaries that mirror those of the bony pelvic outlet. In coming few classes, we will discuss about the maternal pelvis and pelvic outlet. This time there was a question put regarding maternal pelvis in last theory exam. Now, the boundaries of perineum are symphysis pubis anteriorly, ischiopubic rami and ischial tuberosity anterolaterally, sacrotuberous ligament posterolaterally, and coccyx posteriorly. There is an arbitrary line joining the ischial tuberosities which divides the perineum into two triangles. The anterior triangle, which is also called the urogenital triangle, the name explains what does it contain, and the posterior triangle, the anal triangle. Now, this is a beautiful picture. Here you see there is a perineal body. It is a fibromuscular mass at the junction between anterior and posterior triangles, also called the central tendon of perineum. Sonographically, it measures 8 mm and 14 mm wide and thick. It is a very important structure. It serves as the junction of several structures and provides significant perineal support. This is the perineal body. Superficially, the bulbospongiosus, superficial transverse perineal and external and Allen sphincter muscle converge on the perineal body. You see that many muscles are converging here at the perineal body. More deeply, the perineal membrane portions of the pubococcygeus muscle and internal Allen sphincter contribute, and the perineal body is incised by an episiotomy incision. You know that the episiotomy is one of the commonest incisions, commonest surgery which we do during vaginal delivery, and it is torn in second, third, and fourth degree lacerations also. There is a separate chapter on these first, second, and third degree lacerations, but in all these, this perineal body is torn. And here are other structures. Now coming to the superficial space of the anterior perineal triangle and posterior perineal triangle, the structures on the left side of the image, if you see, they can be seen after removal of the Colles fascia. Those on the right side are noted after removal of the superficial muscles of the anterior triangle. So these are the structures. When we remove the Colles fascia, we can see ischiopubic ramus, cutters of Colles fascia, this one, bulbospongiosus muscle, perineal membrane, ischial tuberosity, superficial transverse perineal muscles, perineal body. There is a confluence of many muscles over here, and external anal sphincter. And when on the right side, when We remove the superficial muscles of anterior triangle. These are seen. Corpus of clitoris, here vestibular, greater vestibular gland, cuttage of ischiocavernosus muscle, perineal membrane, levator ani. I will describe levator ani in details, and last is gluteus maximus muscle. So superficial space of the anterior triangle is bounded by the pubic rami superiorly, the ischial tuberosity is laterally, the superficial transverse perineal muscles posteriorly, and it is divided into superficial and deep spaces by the perineal membrane. This membranous partition is a dense fibrous sheet that was previously known as the inferior fascia of the urogenital diaphragm. When we were doing MDs, we used to read this. So the perineal membrane attaches laterally to the ischiopubic rami, medially to the distal third of the urethra and vagina, and posteriorly to the perineal body, and anteriorly to the arcuate ligament of the pubis. The superficial space of the anterior triangle is bounded deeply by the perineal membrane, superficially by the Colles fascia, and the Colles fascia is the continuation of the Scarpa's fascia onto the perineum. This I told in my first slide. On the perineum, Colles fascia securely attaches laterally to the pubic rami and fascia lata of the thigh, inferiorly to the superficial transverse perineal muscle and inferior border of the perineal membrane, medially to the urethra, clitoris, and vagina, and as such, the superficial space of the anterior triangle is a relatively closed compartment. Now, contents of the superficial perineal pouch: Bartholin's glands, vestibular bulbs, clitoral body and crura, branches of the pudendal vessels and nerve, ischiocavernosus, bulbospongiosus, and superficial transverse perineal muscles. The ischiocavernosus muscle each attach on their respective side to the medial aspect of the ischial tuberosity inferiorly and the ischiopubic ramus laterally. Anteriorly, each attaches to a clitoral crus and may help maintain clitoral erection by compressing the crus to obstruct venous drainage. The bilateral bulbospongiosus muscles overlie the vestibular bulbs and Bartholin glands. They attach to the body of the clitoris anteriorly and the perineal body posteriorly. The muscles constrict the vaginal lumen and add release of secretions from the Bartholin's glands, and they may also contribute to the clitoral erection by compressing the deep dorsal vein of the clitoris. The bulbospongiosus and ischiocavernosus muscles also pull the clitoris downward. Last, the superficial transverse perineal muscles are narrow strips that attach to the ischial tuberosities laterally and the perineal body medially. They may be attenuated or even absent, but when present, they contribute to the perineal body. So, coming to the vestibular bulbs, they are also almond-shaped aggregations of veins. They are basically aggregation of veins that lie beneath the bulbospongiosus muscle on either side of the vestibule, and they measure 3 to 4 centimeter in length, 1 to 2 centimeter in width, and 4.5 to 1 centimeter thickness they have. And the bulbs terminate inferiorly at approximately the middle of the vaginal opening and extend upwards towards the clitoris. Their anterior extensions merge in the midline below the clitoral body. And their clinical significance is that during childbirth, the veins in the vestibular bulbs may be lacerated or even ruptured to create a vulvar hematoma enclosed within the superficial space of the anterior triangle. And this hematoma increases very fast because this is a highly vascular area. We need to drain it as quickly as possible. And we have to take ligature of the bleeding vessel. So this is a deep space of the anterior triangle. It lies deep to the perineal membrane and extends up in the pelvis. So perineal membrane is the dividing structure between the two pouches and continuous superficially with the pelvic cavity. This deep space is continuous superiorly with the pelvic cavity. And the contents are portions of the urethra and vagina and certain portions of the internal pudendal artery and its branches and muscles of the striated urogenital sphincter complex. This is the sphincter complex. striated urogenital sphincter complex, sphincter urethrae, compressor urethrae, and urogenital sphincter. This I will show you in next few slides. This is urethra and this is bladder. And this is the levator ani muscle and its different parts, ileococcygeus, puborectalis, pubococcygeus. Now structures on the right side are seen after removal of the perineal membrane, and they are and also shown as structures that attach to the perineal body, like bulbospongiosus, superficial transverse perineal muscle, external anal sphincter, tuboperinealis, and perineal membrane. This diagram was taken from Williams Gynecology, and it is reproduced from McGraw-Hill Education. This Williams Gynecology 2000. It was given in 2016. So female urethra, compared to male urethra, female urethra is a very small structure, and it measures only 3 to 4 centimeter, and it originates within the bladder trigone. And the distal 2/3 of the urethra are fused with the anterior vaginal wall, I've shown in the previous picture. And the epithelial lining of the urethra changes from transitional epithelium proximally to non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium distally. The walls consist of 2 layers of smooth muscle, and inner longitudinal and outer circular. Just try to remember your first year MBBS anatomy classes, and surrounded by a circular layer of skeletal muscle referred to as sphincter urethrae or rhabdosphincter. Approximately at the junction of the middle and lower third of the urethra and just above or deep to the perineal membrane, these 2 strap-like skeletal muscles called the urethrovaginal sphincter and compressor urethrae, these are found. And I've shown you in that previous picture that together with this sphincter urethrae, they constitute the striated urogenital sphincter complex. Just come back with this picture. Sphincter urethrae, compressor urethrae, and ureterovaginal sphincter and striated urethrae. This forms the complex, striated urogenital sphincter complex. So, ureterovaginal sphincter, compressor urethrae, together with sphincter urethrae, they constitute the striated urogenital sphincter complex. This complex supplies constant tonus and provides emergency reflex contraction of the sustained continence. Distal to the level of the perineal membrane, the walls of the urethra consist of fibrous tissue serving as the nozzle that directs the urine stream. And here the urethra has a prominent submucosal layer that is lined by hormonally sensitive stratified squamous epithelium. And within the submucous layer on the dorsal surface of the urethra lies the paraurethral glands. This urogenital sphincter complex is also very important when you prepare a case of prolapse, urethral incontinence, stress incontinence, all these. Now coming to the blood and nerve supply of urethra. Blood supply is by inferior vesical artery, vaginal artery, and internal pudendal arteries. Although still controversial, the pudendal nerve is believed to innervate the most distal part of the striated urogenital sphincter complex. Somatic afferent branches from S2 to S4, S2, S3, S4 that course along the inferior hypogastric plexus variably innervate the sphincter urethrae. So this is very important part, pelvic diaphragm. It is found deep to the anterior and posterior triangles, and this is a broad muscular sling which provides a substantial support to the pelvic viscera. So what is pelvic diaphragm? You can get a direct question on pelvic diaphragm. So it is mainly, we all know levator ani. It is composed of levator ani and the coccygeus muscles. Here, what problem do you face when you read small books from different type of local writers? And the problem is that the names and the divisions and classifications are not correctly written. So it is my sincere advice to all of you that you please follow one proper textbook, and from Williams you can directly write it there. There will not be any mistake, because there is always some confusion in this, which was coccygeus, which was rectalis, What is the classification? So please remember this very well. The pelvic diaphragm is composed of levator ani and coccygeus muscles. First, it is divided into levator ani and coccygeus. Now, how is levator ani divided? Levator ani is in turn contains the pubococcygeus muscle, the puborectalis muscle, and iliococcygeus muscles. So once again, pelvic diaphragm, levator ani, and coccygeus. Now, levator ani has three parts: pubococcygeus, puborectalis, and iliococcygeus muscles. Now, pubococcygeus muscle is also termed the pubovisceral muscle, and it is subdivided again based on the points of insertion and function. So we had pubococcygeus here, which was a part of levator ani, and now this pubococcygeal muscle is again divided into three parts according to the points of insertion and function. And these are pubovaginalis, puboperinealis, and puboanalis muscle. And all these inserts into the vagina, perineal body, and anus respectively. Vaginalis into vagina, perinealis into perineal body, and analis into anus. So clinical significance of levator ani. The vaginal birth conveys significant risk for damage to the levator ani or to its innervation. Evidence supports that levator ani avulsion may predispose women to greater risk of pelvic organ prolapse, and for this reason, current research efforts are aimed at minimizing these injuries. And you all know that when we do surgery for prolapse of uterus, we do plicate approximate the levator ani muscle. So the posterior triangle, it contains the ischial-anal fossa, anal canal, anal sphincter complex, and branches of the pudendal nerve and internal pudendal vessels. Now, anal sphincter complex consists of internal anal sphincter, external anal sphincter, and puborectalis muscle. Look at this diagram. It is showing ischio-anal fossa. They are also called ischio-rectal fossa, and they are two in number. That's why called fossae, and they are basically fat-filled, and they are wedge-shaped spaces, and they comprise the bulk of the posterior triangle. And each fossa has skin as its superficial base. Its deep apex is formed by the junction of the levator ani and the obturator internus muscle. And it is showing here anal canal also, and the ischial-anal fossa. And the borders are laterally the obturator internus muscle, fascia, and the ischial tuberosity. Inferiormedially, the anal canal and sphincter complex. Superiormedially, the inferior fascia of the downward sloping levator ani. Posteriorly, the gluteus maximus muscle and sacrotuberous ligament. And anteriorly, the inferior border of the anterior triangle. You can draw this diagram easily and color the muscle part with brown color. Now, functions. The fat found within each fossa provides support to the surrounding organs. It allows rectal distension during defecation and vaginal stretching during delivery. Clinically, injury to the vessels in the posterior triangle can lead to hematoma formation in the ischio-anal fossa and the potential for large accumulation in these easily distensible spaces. The two fossae communicate dorsally behind the anal canal, and this can be especially important because an episiotomy infection or hematoma may extend from one fossa into the other because they are continuous. So coming to the anal canal, this is the distal continuation of the rectum. This begins at the level of levator ani attachment to the rectum, and it ends at the anal skin. Along this 4 to 5 centimeter length, mucosa consists of columnar epithelium in the uppermost portion. But there is a very important structure which is called the pectinate line, also termed the dentate line. And at this line, simple stratified squamous epithelium begins and continues to the anal verge. And at the verge, keratin and skin adnexa join the squamous epithelium. So here is the line where this epithelium changes from columnar to stratified squamous epithelium. So tissue layer of the anal canal. Why we do need to know about anal canal? Because sometimes complete perineal tear occurs and we have to repair that. So we have to know the anal canal also. Inner layers include anal mucosa, internal anal sphincter, intersphincteric space that contains continuation of the rectum's longitudinal smooth muscle layer. An outer layer which contains the puborectalis muscle as its cephalate component. It was a part of the levator ani complex and external anal sphincter bodily. Within the anal canal, there are three highly vascularized submucosal arteriovenous plexuses, and they are called anal cushions. In vagina, we got the similar vascular complexes, and in anal canal too, and they add complete closure of the canal and fecal continence when opposed. Increased uterine size, excessive straining, and harsh stool create increased pressure that ultimately leads to degeneration and subsequent laxity of the cushion supportive connective tissue base. And these cushions then protrude into the downward through the anal canal. And this leads to venous engorgement within the cushion, and they are nowadays called hemorrhoids or piles. Venous stasis results in inflammation, erosion of the cushion's epithelium, and then bleeding. So, like we had a urethral sphincter complex, urogenital sphincter complex, we have an anal sphincter complex also. And the two sphincters surround when we do a complete perineal tear, this is very important to know about the anatomy of these structures. So that's why I have included in this lecture. The two sphincters surround the anal canal to provide fecal continence. And the sphincters are external anal sphincter and internal anal sphincters. And they both lie near the vagina and may be torn during vaginal delivery. The internal anal sphincter, in short, we can write it as IAS. It is a distal continuation of the rectal circular smooth muscle layer, and it is supplied by predominantly parasympathetic fibers through the pelvic splanchnic nerves, S2, S3, S4, and blood supply along the length is by superior, middle, and inferior rectal arteries. This internal anal sphincter contributes to the bulk of anal canal resting pressure for fecal continence and relaxes prior to defecation. It is 3 to 4 centimeter in length, and this distal margin, it overlaps the external sphincter for 1 to 2 centimeter. Delancey is a very famous name. He had written a lot of literature about the prolapse of the uterus. And the distal side at which this overlap ends is called the intersphincteric groove, and it is palpable on digital examination. External anal sphincter, it is a striated muscle ring that anteriorly attaches to the perineal body and posteriorly it connects to the coccyx via the anococcygeal ligament. The external anal sphincter maintains a constant resting contraction to add continence, provides additional squeeze pressure when continence is threatened, and yet relaxes for defecation. The external sphincter is supplied by the inferior rectal artery, which is a branch of internal pudendal artery, and the nerve supply is through somatic motor fibers from the inferior rectal branch of the pudendal nerve. And the clinical significance is very important for us as an obstetrician. The internal anal sphincter and the external anal sphincter may be involved in 3rd and 4th degree perineal tears, lacerations during vaginal delivery, and reunion of these rings is integral to the defect and for repair. And that's why it is very, very, very important to know the anatomy also. There is an RCOG guideline about these perineal tears. Those who are interested may read that also. So, few words about pudendal nerve. Internal iliac artery is the artery of pelvic viscera, especially the genital organs, and the pudendal nerve is the nerve of external genital organs at many places. It is formed from the anterior MI of S2, S3, and S4 spinal nerves, and it courses between the piriformis and coccygeus muscle. exists through the greater sciatic foramen at a location posterior to the sacrospinous ligament and just medial to the ischial spine. Thus, when injecting local anesthetic for a pudendal nerve block, the ischial spine serves as identifiable landmark. There is a complete question on the clinical importance of ischial spine where internal rotation occurs, where we give pudendal nerve block and many others. It runs beneath the sacrospinous ligament and above the sacrotuberous ligament as it re-enters the lesser sciatic foramen to course along the obturator internus muscle. Pudendal canal. Pudendal canal is also called Alcock's canal. You must be remembering your first year anatomy classes. Alcock's canal is formed by splitting of the obturator internus investing fascia. Pudendal nerve is relatively fixed at its course behind the sacrospinous ligament and within the pudendal canal, and it may be at risk of stretch during downward displacement of the pelvic floor during childbirth. So here you see this picture. It is also taken from Williams Obstetrics 25th edition, and you see here the nerve leaves the Alcock's canal to enter the perineum and divides into three terminal branches: dorsal nerve of the clitoris, perineal nerve, and inferior rectal branch. The dorsal nerve runs between the ischiocavernosus muscle and perineal membrane to supply the clitoral part. The perineal nerve runs superficial to the perineal membrane, and it divides into posterior labial branches and muscular branches which serve the labial skin and the antero-perineal triangle muscle respectively. And the inferior rectal branch runs through the ischioanal fossa to supply the external anal sphincter, the anal mucosa, and the perianal skin. So the major blood site to the perineum is through internal pudendal artery, and these branches mirror the division of the pudendal nerve. So here you can see this is the anus. Here this is levator ani muscle. This is external anal sphincter, ischiorectal fossa. Here there are branches of pudendal nerve. This yellow colored. Then perineal nerve branches, superficial transverse perineal muscle. This one. Then bulbospongiosum muscle. Then ischiocavernosus muscle. Posterior labial nerve. Here same branches. Posterior labial nerve. Then labium majus. Here are the ilioinguinal and genitofemoral nerves. They are coming from above. Then glans and clitoris. Striated urogenital sphincter. There are two sphincters, urogenital and anal sphincter. Then this is ischiopubic ramus. And here you can see perineal membrane with window that exposes striated urogenital sphincter. Then dorsal nerve and artery of the clitoris. Then perineal nerve and artery. Then perineal branch of the posterior femoral cutaneous nerve. Inferior rectal nerve and artery. This is the nerve. And this is red one is artery. By convention, you always color artery red, then blue, nerve yellow. Some people do with green also. And then this is gluteus maximus muscle. So you should try making this type of diagram. If question is put on this, make your diagram very sketchy. So internal pudendal artery and its divisions mainly supply the perineum. So here I end my this talk, and all the contents are from Williams Obstetrics, and so you can, as it is, write in your exam. Thank you so much.
Hello.
Hello, sir.
Yeah. Well, if there are any questions from the participants, Madam would be kind enough to address them. Are there any questions in the chat box? Any questions in chat box? No questions in chat box. Anybody would raise their hand or anything?
I can't see the chat box.
Can you have a look at the chat box? I don't think there are. Yeah, there are no questions in the chat box, Madam. Thank you. So I would like to thank Dr. Shashi for the wonderful presentation. It was a very exciting experience to learn from you, especially for the postgraduates. I think it would have been a very interesting presentation to go through, especially your PowerPoint presentations, which are so painstakingly prepared. And on behalf of all the participants and Anbai, I would like to thank you for having been with us this evening and participated in this. I think there is a question from Tantre Riaz to everyone. The question is a total number of muscles which meet at the perineal body and their name. And the next topic we'll let you know, but the question is the total number of muscles which meet at the perineal body and their name. Would you like
Andre, we have already covered it in slides.
Okay, right.
Yeah, perineal body attachments.
Yeah, if you
I will share my presentation also.
Great, madam, great. To Dr. Tantre Riaz, if you could have a look at the PPTs which madam is being kind enough to share, you will get your answer regarding the number of muscles that meet at the perineal body. Am I right, madam?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then. Any other question? Fine, that's it. And thank you very much, madam. Once again, we are delighted to have you with us, and it was an interesting experience. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I just have one message to the students that this is basically basic anatomy. So the only thing is that you have to revise it again and again, and then you will remember it. So please practice and revise it again and again.
Well said, madam. Well said. The words of wisdom. It's practicing is the key to success. Key to learn more. Practice. Yes, madam. Thank you very much, madam. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Namaste. 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 Thank you.